Hello and welcome to I Am with Eric Faria. I am your host, and today it is my pleasure to have here with me in the studio Venus Lopez, who is a conscious therapist. I love that term. So I'm going to talk to her, and she has a very inspirational story. So, hi, Venus.
Hi, Eric.
How are you?
I'm doing so great. So good to be here.
Thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. It's my honor.
Pleasure. Yes.
Yeah.
So I would like to ask you, since we're talking about consciousness today, right?
Yeah.
Where did your consciousness journey begin?
That's such a good question because it started very young for me. I remember being 5 years old, and my grandmother was talking about God. And I asked her a question, what is this God thing that you're talking about? And she told me that God lives inside of me, and that if I wanted to speak to God, I just had to have this conversation. And so I clearly remember going into my room that night and laying in my bed and talking to God, this energy, this force, not really understanding it, but, having this dialogue with the self, so to speak.
Right.
And as I grew older, and I believe around 10, 12 years old, I had this unique dynamic within my family because my mother hadn't really chosen a religion, so to speak. She had kind of the same ideas about my grandmother that my grandmother had about God, that God lives inside of you and that you can have this dialogue within yourself. You don't need a mediator, so to speak. She would say to me. But my stepfather was Catholic, and so we'd go to church on Sundays, and I'd learn about Christ. And then my father is a Babalawo, which is a priest in an African religion that comes out of Nigeria.
Wow.
It's called the Yoruba religion. Yeah, and so they had all these ideas about my father's background and his culture. And my mom's family were Jehovah's Witnesses, and they had all these ideas about Catholicism and the Yoruba religion. So for me, I was very confused. I didn't understand because they were all talking about God.
Yeah.
Yet very.
And as a child, you're getting like three different points of views, like Catholicism, Jehovah's Witness, and then your father's own religion.
Yeah. So it was really interesting. So then I went on this quest. I'll never forget it. I really made a decision within my own being that I wanted to understand this God thing, this spirit, this thing that everybody was talking about. But that had all these different perspectives on how to communicate with this energy, And so I just was insatiable. I read every book I could, whether it was on Hinduism or Catholicism or Buddhism. And, I just really started to feed all the different ideas that were out there about consciousness and about spirit. And what I understood personally from my own story was that they were all basically saying the same thing, just in their own language, in their own perspective, and in their own understanding. So all rivers lead to the same ocean, and that I got at a very young age. And so I just continued on that path of feeding myself all the different ideas that were out there, and I started cultivating my own consciousness. And then when I got a little older, I was invited to do a sacred ceremony with some plant medicine. And that was my very first journey into other states of consciousness and what that even meant, as opposed to, being out in a rave or at a party or at a club and working with these medicinal medicines that are out there but not really used properly or in the right set and setting. People are having these experiences. Some of them are positive, some of them are negative, depending on their set and setting. I had never really explored that as like a young person. That was never something that I was interested in. So as an older woman, when it was, I got the invitation basically to come and sit in a ceremony that was done, in a sacred way with plant medicines that open up your consciousness. It just took it to a whole nother level for me. And I really understood more and more what consciousness was. And that was a 7.5-year journey of working with different plants. And, in different cultures in Peru or in Colombia. They work with these other plants. One is called ayahuasca. Another plant that comes out of Africa is ibogaine. And what I came to understand is that, you know, these plant medicines that come out of the earth that were gifted to us, literally, to work within our own consciousness, to explore the different parts of ourselves, to understand that there's a bigger us. Yeah. And then there's the little me, you know, right. And the little me is wonderful, and I love the little me. But I also really am driven and so in love with the big me, because sure. You know, the big me is where it's at personally for me. Just connecting with that source, that intelligence that permeates all of life. Yeah. And I think humans are, you know, just one expression of life, but you know, there are many other expressions of life, and so all things have consciousness if they're breathing and they have a heartbeat, and you know, that's what I came to understand through my journey.
That's fantastic. And going back a little bit to your upbringing, do you think that not having a specific religion or dogma, you know, forced upon you, do you think that was beneficial or not?
I think it was everything. I mean, because it really planted the seed, the spark for me to explore, to discover.
On your own.
On my own. And really just have my own ideas, you know, because really everybody, I believe personally that spirit can speak to anybody in the language that they understand. Sure. And it's a very personal thing that happens when you're in communion with, you know, the big me, the self. And I think it's really important for people to go inside. I think that having structure and framework is wonderful. And regardless of what framework that is, whether it's through, you know, Buddhism or Catholicism, right. I think having some type of framework initially just to introduce you to the ideas of this, you know, bigger me, is great. And whatever tools you need to communicate are wonderful. But I also believe that it's a very personal experience, and that when you really commune with the big me, it has its own language for you, and it might not be in a specific dogma. And I think that's, you know, what spirituality was born out of. Right. Just this idea going beyond
the dogmas that we are brought up with normally, right?
Yeah, the frameworks. Yeah. That are, you know, and they're there for a reason. And I think that if you really understand consciousness, it doesn't matter whether you're reading the Bible or the Quran or any of the sacred scriptures. They're all, again, they're all saying the same thing, just in their own language. And so it's been a powerful tool for me to utilize the fact that I had all these different frameworks to work within, and then make a decision on my own as to which framework suited me best. You know,
that is the main point.
Yeah.
I love that, because I feel like sometimes people are not even given the choice, right? It's just imposed on them. Yeah. So when you are giving the freedom, when you're giving the choice, you're giving a gift, because then you can choose for yourself what path, what journey suits you best.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
I couldn't agree more. And I also think you can find your way through any framework.
That's
you
true,
know?
yes. Because there are people who are very religious, brought up very religious, very strict.
Absolutely.
That then once they reach an adult age, they start to just explore, and they go off and they see other things, and their minds are expanded.
Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. If they want to receive that, you know, that information, because, you know, it's available to everybody.
It is available to everyone.
But I also think when you're raised in a very strict dogma, and you're also in a culture that doesn't understand a lot of the dogmas anymore, it's, you know, the traditions are kind of falling away for more of the modern people that are their own thinkers, right? And so I think if you get caught in a framework, like my cousins who were raised Jehovah's Witnesses, it was a very tight box for them. Yeah. And because they had no other options, once they got to an age where they didn't have to answer to, you know, the parents or the culture, they couldn't wait to break out and break free and leave that behind, because for them it was too constricting. And then some of them eventually, as they got older, found their way back there because they were familiar with the framework, but they were able to explore other ventures and then come back and go, okay, this does speak to me, and now I can understand it a little better, and now I can explore my own being with this framework or this information, you know?
Yeah. This is a perfect stopping point, so
Okay.
I want to continue this conversation with you.
Yeah.
And so for everybody watching, we will be right back after this break. And welcome back to I Am with Eric Faria. Once again, I'm your host, and I have here a conscious therapist, Venus Lopez. So just gonna jump right in.
Great.
So Venus, why do you think that when we were talking about like the little I, the big I, right?
Yeah.
And expanding consciousness, why do you think that plant medicine, for example, like ayahuasca, why do you think that it's legal in other countries but not in the United States, for example?
I think mainly it's a part of their culture. You know, we've been working, I'm talking the human race, we've been working with plant medicine pretty much since the dawn of time. But I know in specific cultures, like in Peru, they've, you know, 2,000-3,000 years, they've been working with these modalities in order to hack. I see it as a technology, literally. That's exactly what it is.
Yeah.
And if you ask a medicine man, you know, in the jungle, like, how do you know this information? How do you, you know, how did you know to use this plant or to do this and use this to combine and make ayahuasca? They will tell you the plants told us. And from their perspective, you know, we're talking lineages. Years and years and years, thousands of years of their culture understanding, you know, before there were any distractions and Twitter and Facebook and our, you know, real-time Facebook was Earth, you know, the jungle. We were watching these animals and communing with the plants in a very different way back then. And I think that that culture really developed a relationship with the plants, and they believe that the plants have intelligence, you know, and they've been around, you know, I think it's like 700 million years longer than the human race, right?
Wow.
So they have an intelligence within their system, and they believe that when you ingest the plants, that on a cellular level where they're holding their intelligence and their information, their cells and your cells commune when you drink the medicine. And now you're basically getting these downloads, you're getting this information from the plants that has a broader perspective because it's been on the planet way longer. And it does have an intelligence that permeates all of life. And so this intelligence that's permeating the plant is now able to communicate with your cells and communicate with your consciousness. And you're able to break through barriers of the 3D mind, which is, you know, very limited, and it's wonderful. And it's great to be a human and have this incredible human experience. It's such a gift to be alive. It really, truly is. All of it. The good, the bad,
the ugly,
the ugly, you know, but really it's so great to have all these incredible tools out there in order to get through the good, the bad, and the ugly when you do get stuck in your own, you know, 3D framework. It's nice to step out and have a broader perspective about life, and I think that's why these cultures held on to these traditions, because they understood the value, they understood the technology. And I think as we became, you know, more westernized, as a culture, we started to fall away from those things. And, you know, and we started just playing with the world on the material and outside levels. And I think that has value too. And I think that science and the Western medicine is just as valuable, you know.
Sure.
But they do different things,
Yeah.
and they're finding now. I mean, they've been doing studies. MAPS is an organization that.
Yeah, you mentioned that. Talk a
Yeah.
little bit about it. Yeah.
Yeah, so MAPS is an organization that has been around for 25 years, and they've been lobbying to Congress for 25 years to try and get psychedelic medicines into medical therapies because they are seeing massive changes in humans that have been suffering with depression for 15, 25, 30 years.
Yes, yeah.
And they're doing one session with psilocybin and they're cured.
In one session.
In one session. They're treating people with PTSD with MDMA, and they're cured within 2 to 3 sessions.
Wow.
And this is real live documented evidence here that there are other modalities that right now in the States are considered illegal, but they if they were used in the proper set and setting, like I said, it's different if you're going into an experience as a party or as an escape mode, right?
Right.
If you're trying to escape your life, you're not going to get the information to get you into a better framework if you're not in the right set and setting, right?
Yeah.
But if you are working with people that can hold space for you and that can guide you through these expansive states of consciousness while you're learning basically to have your own sea legs is what I call them,
I like that.
because you're going and diving into deeper oceans within your own conscious mind when you're working with these other modalities like psilocybin or MDMA or I'm sorry.
Ayahuasca.
Ibogaine, but there's another one that is not coming to mind right now.
That's okay.
Okay.
But in a way, you are expanding.
LSD.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Yeah. So they're doing research now in Oxford University in London, where they're putting people on LSD. Finally, the governments are allowing the medical community to actually do these studies, and they put somebody under the LSD medicine and then put them into an MRI scan, and they're seeing the difference between the brain.
Wow.
Not on medicine and the brain on medicine. And it's like the entire neural network is being lit up. And so parts of the brain that never communicate with each other are able to communicate with each other in these states of consciousness. And that's what I think is where the real medicine lies, because when you can step out of the framework that you've had your whole life, whether it's through your culture, through your upbringing, through your heritage, your lineage, and this is how you see the world every day. And now you get to, have this incredible experience in the right set and setting with the proper guidance, and you get to see a much broader view. It really helps to reframe your own ideas about your life. And it gives you a broader perspective on, your story. And at the end of the day, we are the stories we tell.
Yeah, we are all storytellers.
We're all
walking,
storytellers.
living, breathing.
Exactly, yeah. So it's really important to tell really good stories if you want to have a good life.
Yeah.
And sometimes it takes getting out of that framework of all to realize that you can tell a different story.
That's perfect. This is a perfect stopping point. Yeah, because it's all about storytelling, isn't it?
Yeah.
The stories we tell ourselves.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. So we're going to take a little break.
Okay.
So for everybody watching, we will be back right after this. Don't miss it. And welcome back to I Am with Eric Faria. Today I have Venus Lopez with me. So in the previous segment, we were talking about, storytelling, expanding our consciousness. And it got me thinking, some people might actually be afraid of expanding their consciousness because they've had this constricted, restricted living way of thinking that it might really, be something completely new to them.
Yeah.
What do you think is that fear, and is that fear founded or unfounded?
Yeah, so I've heard stories, and I've spoken to people who have had those experiences where they do get very afraid being in a wider framework, wider state of consciousness. I had a friend tell me that for him, he said he felt like a very small boat on a large ocean. And for me, my framework and understanding is I am the boat, but I'm also the ocean. Right. So
You're
for me
everything. You're connected, yes.
yeah. So for me that space of consciousness is not scary at all. But for somebody who doesn't go into those states, or like I said, they're learning their sea legs and they're learning how to tread in those waters, it can be very big. It's a very big space.
Yeah.
To go into these other states, and it can be very scary when you don't have any roots. So for me, roots is whether it's spirituality or science, like you need an anchor, something that's going to anchor your understanding when you're in those states.
Yeah.
So that way you're not flying off way too high into Neverland, and you don't have any like anchor into the real world. That's not the point, you know?
Right.
It's not to get high. It's to go inside and really explore who you are. And I'll give you like a short story of, let's say somebody got bit by a dog when they were 5 years old.
Sure.
And so now all they have to do is hear a dog a block away bark, and their body will literally go into the same experience it had when it was 5 years old, because we have muscle memory and we have, you know, cellular
it's an
memory.
Unconscious reaction.
Totally. And so that's a heavy burden to carry as a grown-up, even though you're aware, okay, that dog is far away, or not all dogs are going to bite me. There's still this visceral reaction that happens in the body, and I think what these medicines can do, something like ayahuasca, it helps to look at your storytelling, like I said, from an expanded perspective, and get you to see that, oh, that is right. Not all dogs are going to bite me, and that was an experience that happened to me when I was a child. But now I'm a grown-up, I can take care of myself.
Yeah,
and so you can release that trigger that gets stuck in the body energetically and also mentally. And those are really good tools to have.
They're amazing. I would equate it to like being in a car, so you're both the driver and the passenger.
Exactly.
You're the one driving the car, but you're also able to see yourself outside of the one being the driver as a passenger. So it's a beautiful experience.
Yeah,
I mean, in my opinion.
Yeah, I agree. There's a physicist named Nassim Harriman. There you go, Nassim Harriman. And he explains it, consciousness, so to speak, or life itself. The human is basically the event horizon. Like life gave birth to all things, right? This spirit, this consciousness gave birth to Gaia, gave birth to Earth, and Earth gave birth to everything that is here now. And so the human being, is actually capable of witnessing itself.
Yeah.
And that's a huge feat within consciousness, you know? And now to be able to actually go into your own consciousness and look at all those corners and see what's lying around and lying dormant, or holding you back, or keeping you from your true potential, or keeping you in a state of fear constantly, of thinking that you're just this little me all the time, and being stuck in the little me mind. It's an experience, and it's a wonderful experience, but to actually have the experience of the big me mind allows you to see how beautiful it is to be the little me, but how powerful it is to be the big me, and that you're not this weak, timid little thing, that you're actually life itself, exploring itself. And what a gift to remember that, to know that, to carry that in your being when you're walking through life, and real things happen to you, and you can pull out that tool and go, okay, you know what, I just had a bad day, but really in reality, I'm this big me, and this big me is just, you know, exploring itself, and then you can let all those little things go, and you're not carrying them around like a weight on your shoulder. And you know, a lot of people do that from very young age and until they die. They carry these these ancestral things, these ideas about themselves, and they don't know how to-
Patterns of behavior also,
exactly.
yeah. From like generation to generation. I see that
Yes,
clearly.
yes.
Yeah.
And so these patterns can be broken by using these other tools and technology in order to hack the mind.
Yeah.
And then once you're in there, that's when you can do the good work, you know?
Yeah.
And just clear out those cobwebs.
Yeah, I totally agree. So we're almost at the end here, but before we go, do you think that people are afraid of the light or of the dark, like their own inner light or of their own inner dark side?
Yeah. You know, I've read
ahead,
many
please.
books that talk about this.
Like the shadow, right?
Yeah. You know, if you want to be a whole and complete person, you have to deal with your shadow and your light, right? Because you can't have one without the other if
We're both.
if we're dealing in duality, and that's what's happening here. So I totally believe in embracing both, but I think that people are most afraid of their light because it's too scary to be that magnificent.
Right? To be the big I and not the little I.
Yes. And to really like own that out in today's world is not necessarily something that's understood, you know? So I think that, and to live in our shadows, you know, there's something that the shadow brings too, you know, there's a charge there.
Of course.
When you get angry or frustrated and, but those are, again, they're emotions in this big ocean, right? And I think what I've learned from working just with consciousness itself, from, you know, being a young girl, not just these medicinal medicines, but just with consciousness is that, to be fluid, to be authentic, to when I'm angry, I'm angry.
Yeah, and
But
experience it.
Experience
not
it,
deny
but
yourself
don't
that.
live in that
Yes.
space for months, weeks, years at a time,
Yes,
you know?
You're going to die.
Yeah.
Die a heart attack pretty soon. Like
Yeah,
that.
exactly. You know, so, and experience bliss, but you can't live there all the time
Yeah.
because then how can you know what bliss is if you're just constantly in that state?
Yes.
So I think that, you know, the gift of consciousness is to have all of these emotions and to be in all these different flavors of life, but to not hold on to any of them, to not identify yourself with any of them, because none of them are you.
Yeah.
But they are expressions of you know, consciousness and of emotion.
Yeah, but you are not the emotion.
You are not the emotion. And I think that when you can remember you know, these things, and you can hold that framework for yourself, then you can be authentic and you can be real. And I think for some people the shadow is a little scary for them.
Yes.
But you know, when you can tame it and it's not a wild animal, but you can express yourself in a way that people can understand, hey, I'm angry, but I'm not gonna, you know, stab you or
Yeah, exactly. And no,
take you out. Yeah.
I'm learning to deal with my shadow like more and more as time progresses.
Yeah, we all are.
We all are, right?
Yeah. It's
So
the journey.
The journey. It's the journey.
It's the journey.
Appreciating every moment, every emotion, all of you, right? The whole of you.
Yeah.
So my last question before you go, I know, you know, I could talk to you for hours.
Me too.
The title of the show is I Am.
Yeah.
So if you had to define yourself, and I know this is hard, if you had to complete the sentence, what would you say? I am.
Interesting. I am all things. That's how I see the world. I am all things, and all things are me.
Beautiful. Thank you so much for being here,
Thank
Venus. This was
you.
really great. I really appreciate the conversation. Like I said, I could talk to you for hours.
It's
so
been wonderful.
hopefully you can come back and, you know, expand more of our consciousness.
Aho, that would be amazing. Thank you so much. It's been wonderful.
Oh, thank you. So for everybody watching, thank you. We will be back next week with a new episode.